Good afternoon and welcome to All Women, another Friday talk. Today we will have Mireia Rosset, who will be talking about how to use jobs to be done technique for a product innovation. She's a senior user research at N26. So I want to say welcome and thank you, Mireia, for joining today.
Hello everybody. Thank you, Daniel, and all the All Women team for hosting me today, and thank you all of you as well for joining this session, especially on a Friday afternoon. I'm Mireia Rosset. I'm senior user researcher, currently working at N26. I have around 6-7 years of experience doing research. Some time work on more agency side, and more recently more on the product side. I'm gonna be talking about jobs to be done. What is it about? What's exactly jobs to be done? We hear that in many different places. How to use them for product innovation, and what's the role of research as well on that, giving some guidelines or some tips on how to discover them. I also would like to say that there's plenty of resources out there, books and so on, about jobs to be done. So I'm sure I'm not going to say anything here that it's not out there, but instead I'm going to be focusing much more on what's relevant to me, what really works for me in my everyday. And also from a research perspective, what is the structure, or what is the direction that I take, or the mindset that I use when I apply them. Also, I don't know how much experience do you have using them. So if any of you has other tips or other experiences that would like to share, I would also like to hear, so we can talk about it at the end of the session. So what's jobs to be done? From my point of view, and in general, jobs to be done is used more as a framework. It's really a mindset rather than a goal or an end in itself. And it's mainly used, for product innovation. And I really like to start with this quote that I think represents very well what jobs to be done is all about. This quote is from Theodore Levitt. He used to be teacher at the Harvard Business School during the 60s. And apparently he was very known because he was always saying that to his students. He was saying that people don't want a quarter-inch steel, they want a quarter-inch hole. And it really represents very well what jobs to be done is all about. It's really, this framework, and the essence of it, it's more about focusing on the outcome rather than the technology in itself. So we should focus more on what's the end goal, what our customers are trying to achieve, and see more the technology, let's say, as a means to a result, and not that much as the result in itself. So then when we start understanding what are the goals that people want to accomplish, and how by achieving these goals, or it means like a progress in their lives, then we can also start understanding as well what are the drivers that motivate this will to achieve these goals. And it can also help us to predict how people behave and why they do it. That would be the mindset. Focus on the outcome first, and then you will figure out what's the technology. And jobs to be done has, like, with that in mind, it really it's a mindset, and it has, let's say, certain principles that we have to take into account or keep like in the back of our minds when we work and in our everyday. So first of all, we have to think that people use products and services to get their job done, not to interact with an organization. So think, for example, if in 2 weeks' time you're planning a trip to Canary Islands, for example, and you have to stay somewhere, you want to find a place to stay. You don't care if you find it through Booking, through Airbnb, or through somebody else. But at the same time, jobs are stable over the time, and even as technology changes, the job stays the same. So think about the will to communicate with a friend. This is a historical need, a historical goal that we always try to achieve in certain moments, one way or another. Maybe centuries ago, we were sending letters. More recently, we were sending postcards. And right now, we might share pictures on Instagram. But the goal stays the same. Also, people seek products and services that enable them to get more of the job done better. So if I, like thinking back again to the trip to the Canary Islands, we want to find that place to stay quickly and at the cheapest price possible. So we're going to go to the solution that gives us that. We don't care, again, if it's Airbnb, if it's Booking, or it's through a friend. And jobs are also, or can be used as a unit of analysis, let's say, to make the innovation more predictable and reduce risk. And by that, we are future-proofing, let's say, our solutions before even we start building them. Because we know that there is a problem there. There is something that we can solve, and we know exactly how we can do it and why this problem needs to be solved. So it's better for us. We already have a base where we can start from. But it's also very useful, especially when we are working in a company, in a big structure, because it's a way of seeing things that can be applied across the organization. And let's say that you can use it as a common language. So everybody's focused towards that same goal. That is like, how do we help people to get to that outcome, and leave aside the implementation, keep the focus on understanding, and then we can after figure out how are we going to implement that. But everybody works towards the same direction, and there is a common language that is shared. So with that clear in our minds, we can then start going more into the detail of, okay, what is exactly a job to be done? Like, how do we analyze that? How do we define that? So a job has different aspects that we have to consider. And even when we talk to customers or we talk to potential users of our solution, we can start structuring what they tell us based on that. Or even we can start analyzing the whole situation based on that. So first of all, we have this main job, this goal that they are trying to accomplish. But there's always a performer that is trying to accomplish that job. And that performer can change. Think again about the trip to the Canary Islands. It might be that I want to go alone. I want to go there to disconnect from everything, to meditate, and have a space for myself. Or I might be going on a romantic trip with my partner. Or maybe I'm just planning a team building activity with other colleagues. And this really is going to affect the job itself, but also many other aspects that I will have to consider. For example, the decision making. Who's going to make the decision? What's going to be the process? So yeah, then it comes the process here. We have to follow certain steps to get the job done. This is what we call the micro jobs. And again, that's going to be affected on, for example, the performers, who they are, how many they are, and so on. And all of that, it's kind of, let's say, bundled somehow by certain circumstances. So the circumstances really affect how all of that happens. For example, now, with the COVID situation, this is a specific circumstance that they have to consider when making this trip that probably is different to what was happening 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So there are different aspects that we will have to consider for that. But circumstances can also be the moment of the day for another job, or the place where this job has to happen. And all of these together will result in certain needs that will also help us define what are the success metrics of what we do. So probably if I'm going on this trip on my own versus I'm going on this trip with my colleagues as a team building activity, it's going to be very different, the needs. There will be very different needs. So this is something that we also have to identify and have to understand, because that will really help us to achieve that success and help our customers or our potential users to really get that job done more or better, or both. But that's not only it. We also have to take into account that the job has different elements within it as well. So there is this main functional job that is the main goal that I want to achieve. Think about, example, communicating with my friends or having a place to stay. That's a really functional job. But in itself, it will have as well a social aspect, a social job within it. Like, how do I want to be perceived by achieving this functional job? And there's also an emotional part of that. How do I want to feel by achieving this functional job? Like, if I go to this trip to Canary Islands and I have to book this place to stay, how do I want my friends to perceive me by going to that place? Or how do I want to feel by staying in that place? And here is where the tricky part can start, because sometimes it can be easy to put the focus more on the social or the emotional aspect of the job and forget about the functional job. And the thing is, if the main functional job is not accomplished, focusing just on the social or emotional part is not going to be successful. But at the same time, we also have other related jobs to that main job that we have to consider. So I'm thinking now, for example, if I'm opening, or think about this trip, for example, to Canary Islands, we might have to get tested. So that's another related job that we will have to do now. So that's part of that, and that has also a journey in itself, for example. So thinking about all this situation, this really helps us map whatever is the context, whatever is the goal. We have to start identifying all these different aspects, because then when we talk to people, we will be able to distinguish all these different elements and start creating this map. And really having this map will help us to easily identify opportunities and easily understand where should we put our focus on. But once we have all of that clear, then we also have to start thinking, okay, so are we going to be going from the bottom up? Like, we can go into these two directions. Bottom up means that we don't have a solution yet. And then we have to understand people's objectives from the very beginning, so that we understand how to develop this new solution. Or it can be that we go from the top down. We already have a product, but we want to understand why people use it. And by that, we might be able to identify different uses that we didn't know of our solution, or even identify possible new categories for our solution that we didn't think of. So that's another way to go, depending on where we start from. So once we have all this situation clear, and we have the structure clear, and we understand where we start from and where do we want to go, we then have to start identifying these specific jobs. And here is where research really plays a main role. This is the core of our job. And for that, we can take very different approaches. So we can start depending on the level of specificity that we need to know the context, or the level of commitment in terms of time that we can afford. So we can start with in-depth interviews and focus groups, and then validate what we learn from there through surveys. This usually tends to be more used when we go more from the bottom up, because we don't have the solution yet, and we really have to start building this base of understanding to inform well what's the solution that we are going to be building. But we can also go the other way around. If we need to know more on the context, what's happening, and get more feedback from there, we can use user intercepts, we can use diary studies, we can also use ethnography or concept tests. And usually we would do that more when we already have a solution and we want to understand how people are using it and for which goals. But it might be, depending on the situation, that we would have to mix or probably go both, or try to find a balance between them. But these are the main approaches that we would be using. And once we have clear, okay, so this is the time that we have, this is the level of information that we need right now, then we have to go ahead, start talking to people, start observing people. And yeah, these researchers, we know very well how to do it. So yeah, be all ears, be all eyes, observe and listen, and then start focusing on, okay, what's the main job? And here we will know, or we will start listening for answers more related to the what and the why. What do they do and why do they do it? We will then start understanding as well what are the steps that they follow to get this job done, what are the micro jobs involved in that. And here we will listen to we listen for answers more related to the how. How do they do it? How do they go about it? And then we will also have to identify these emotional and social aspects. And here we search more for the feel, the avoiding to feel, the being perceived as, or avoid being perceived as. We will also identify the needs. And here we will listen more for the whys, why they have to achieve that, why they want to avoid feeling like that, why they have to follow all these steps, and so on. And we will also have to understand what are the competitors, what other solutions, how are they solving this job right now? What are the alternatives to the solution that we have or we would potentially create? So here we listen more for the hacks, the workarounds, the procrastinations, and the avoidances. And that gives us hints and a clearer understanding of what these alternatives are. And if you remember, we were talking about the fact that all of that happens in a certain context, in certain circumstances. And here we have to understand more the when and the where of why, where this job needs to happen, when this job needs to happen, and when all these steps, all these needs happen, all these alternatives, when do they use them, why they take these hacks, in what moment, and so on. And here we will probably start getting very interesting feedback. And we might get surprised as well. We might see that maybe people are using our solution for something that we didn't expect. And we might discover that maybe the competitors that we thought they were our competitors, actually, they are not. And with all of that in mind, once we have gathered all this feedback, we have mapped already all these jobs and needs and alternatives, we will start thinking of possible solutions, possible ideas that we might have, but we also have to understand what really can help people to be more open for a change, and what are the aspects that can pull them back a little bit or stick to their current even hacks or solutions that they are currently using. And here we talk more about the forces of change. So yeah, what can drive them more towards a possible new solution? Here we have to identify the problem, what is pushing them away from the solution they currently have, but also what would attract them from a new solution, what would be interesting for them. And we also have to understand what's pulling them back. So we might have to understand if there is a historical loyalty, for example, to their current solution. That, for example, we see it a lot at N26, that it's a new bank, it's all online, and we see that still certain people use us more as a secondary account, and they still keep their main bank account in their old traditional bank. And most of the times they are not happy with that bank because it has probably less solutions, it's less dynamic, it's less flexible, it's even less fast. But it's the account that they created when they were young. Maybe their parents also have the account in the same place. And even if they are not so happy about it, they keep this habit, they stick with it. And at the same time, we have to understand what is the level of uncertainty that they are willing to take, or to accept, how anxious they are about change. And that's very important because it will give us as well some hints on what type of information should we provide them, or in which way we can reassure them. And when we start understanding that, is more when the magic starts to happen, especially when we connect that with the previous questions. So here we would identify possible opportunities, asking, for example, questions about what do you struggle with, what's not ideal about your current solution, what do you like about your current solution, what makes you stick with it, what excites you, or what would excite you about something new, about a new way of solving this job, a new solution for that. And what would you think about this solution, or how do you think this solution would work, for example? And we would also have to understand what concerns them about this possible solution. What are they able to accept, and what are they not so comfortable with? What level of reassurance, basically, they would need. And once we start understanding all of that and mapping as well all this information, we can then start identifying what are the gains that we should be focusing on, and what are the pains that we should be solving. And here we see what's the opportunity for us. Where should we go towards, or what should we do? Most common obstacles usually to take a new solution, to start using a new solution, are many, but there is a group of them that are quite common and universal for any category, let's say, or any product. So the old way of doing things is assumed as accepted. That's the main one. This is exactly the example that I was telling you before. So I'm not so happy about my current solution, but I just assume that banks are like that. We cannot do much more. It can be that if it requires a behavioral change, that might become an obstacle. For example, again, we see that at N26, we know that our base of customers is usually, in average, much younger than probably a traditional bank, because of the fact that, for example, we don't have physical branches, everything is online, and it's really a change in the behavior that probably not everybody is willing to or is feeling comfortable with. There might be also that there are multiple decision makers, and maybe I want to go on this trip to Canary Islands, but my friends don't want. So I just have to stay where I am. Or maybe there is a hotel that I really like, but my partner doesn't like. So we have to make a decision here. And yeah, that can be also an obstacle if the other person, for example, doesn't want to go towards the same direction. It can be that there is a high cost or a high risk of changing. And again, we see that as well. Sometimes at N26, for example, when it comes more about moving my salary, moving my all my expenses to N26, closing my old bank, I find it risky because I'm not sure. It's really a big effort that I have to make, that I just might not be willing to take. So that's also a possible situation that happens very often. I don't know what's happening. Can you see me?
I can see your presentation.
Yeah, I don't know, something is crashing. I don't know what's going on. Okay. I think I will have to close and start again. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, maybe you can close the presentation or stop sharing and then share it again.
Technical issues.
Always happen. No worry.
Yeah.
Sorry about it. She will be back soon, I guess. So just to let you know, we are in All Women. We are launching 2 new courses: web development and content design and UX writing. So I'm gonna leave our email, our admission team. We'll be back to you if you are interested on one of those courses, and you can also check our webpage. So I will be putting here in the chat. You are mute, Mireia.
Sorry. Yeah, it was the whole Google crash. So I don't know what happened.
No worries.
Okay. Sorry about that. Cool. Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that there are many different obstacles to adopt a new solution. So added to the ones that I was mentioning before, there are more. So it can be that people, for example, are not used to the category. They are unfamiliar with it. That happened, for example, with Segway or Google Glasses. It didn't get the success expected, basically because it was creating a whole new category, and it was not very clear for the people. It might be that there is limited supporting infrastructure as well. That's happening, for example, with electric vehicles. Now it's improving. But if we remember at the beginning, it was really hard because there was just not the infrastructure for it. It can also happen that the solution really creates pain points because it's too complex, or it really takes a lot of time to understand. That happens especially, for example, for B2B solutions like platforms and like more business related tools that if they are complex or require a lot of time to learn, it can really become a pain. And people might not be willing to change just because they have to go through all this process again. It can also happen that it's cool, but it's not better because it doesn't really solve the main job. Remember what we were talking at the beginning, that we have this main functional job and we might be solving the social or the emotional job. But if the main job is not solved, in the end, no matter how cool the solution is, it's not useful enough, or it's not really solving that, doesn't help to get that job done in the way that it's expected. And it can also happen, and it happens quite often, that the offering isn't targeted to a specific job or to specific personas. So people doesn't really understand maybe how to use it, or doesn't really see clear whether or how this is going to help them in any way. And again, this happened with Segway, for example. It was one of the reasons as well why they didn't get the success they were expecting, because it was just, unclear. So once we have identified all these aspects and we have all this map of all the jobs and pains and gains and what would attract them and like what are the habits they have and so on, then we have to start thinking how to embed all this information in the everyday. And possible ways to do that, it can be to create job-based personas. So it can help us understand better, or have a clear understanding of what's this job about and how we would help somebody to get the job done, empathize more with the job in itself. And we can also start using job stories instead of user stories. So we know that many times, sorry, here it says a job story, but it's a user story. We use user stories when we are defining more the job in implementation itself, who's going to do what's feasible, what's not, and so on. And we usually create user stories more like that. As an X persona, I want certain thing, or I want to do certain thing, so that something happens. But the thing is, doing it like that, it really disconnects the solution from the job itself, from the goal from the outcome that we were talking at the beginning as well. Like, how is the solution and the outcome connecting here? Instead, we can phrase it differently. We can use more job stories to really still help us to divide the implementation work, but at the same time connect the solution with the job better. So we can say, for example, as an ex persona, when a situation happens, I want to certain thing, so I can achieve an unexpected outcome. And this really helps us connect that. But we also have to define the success metrics, and jobs to be done helps us a lot for that. Remember the needs that we were talking at the beginning. And we can then start ideating as well. And we have to keep in mind when we are ideating and defining these success metrics, what is the motivation? How much is the desire to accomplish that specific objective? Also, what's the level of ability of the people, of the performers of this job? Because they have to have the skill to really get the job done, and our solution has to enable them to do that. So how is our solution going to help them? It's going to teach them how to reach it. And related to the previous, we also have to understand what's the trigger needed to help them take that action, to help that behavior to occur, or even when we were talking about the obstacles or the possible habits or levels of uncertainty, how we can help them overcome them through different types of prompts that we can present them. And once we start to have that more or less clear, I don't know if you know about this innovation distribution curve. That's quite a popular representation of how innovations are adopted. There's always a small group of people that are the innovators, that they really love everything new, and they are willing to take and try new solutions without fear. They are probably less attached to the habits, less anxious about change. But on the other extreme, we also have the laggards who are on the opposite. They are more attached to their historical solution. They are more anxious of change, and they want to keep with their old traditional solution for a long time. They need more proof that this solution really works and it can help them better. And we have to think that all of us, we are one of these people for different things. So for certain things, we might be innovators, and for others, we might be laggards. And we have to take that into account, like the group of people that we're going to be reaching out to. Where are they going to be? How innovative, let's say, or how much of a disruption, let's say, is our solution or not? Because then it also will help us understand which of these people are going to be more willing to adopt it first. And we also have to think, like, what are the aspects that really influence the adoption of an innovation? So there are things that are quite universal as well. One of them is the relative advantage perceived. So how much better is your solution to the solution that I'm currently using? Think up at the very beginning when we were talking about the principles of jobs to be done and the fact that people want to get more of their job done better. So how much is that helping them to get that? Not because it's not like real or not, it's more what they perceive. Also, how compatible is the solution with their daily life, beliefs, their values? How much connected is our solution with that? We also have to think about the complexity and the understandability of our solution. It has to be easy to understand. It has to be easy and simple to use, so it's easier to adopt and at least try. And yeah, related to that, how easy it is to try in itself. Like, can it be tested without any penalty, without any cost, or without taking much risks? How we can make this new solution, easy to try for them. And yeah, just related to the triability, the more the solution is different or new, or the more it is disruptive, the more we have to give the option for people to try. Because observability is also very important. So the more I see other people like me using it, the more I'm going to be open to try it too. And this is how this distribution curve happens, because there are some innovators that start to try it. There are more and more people starting to try it. Then more and more people see other people trying it, and then it becomes bigger. So we have to be very careful with that and give options for this try and make it visible. And once we have that clear, and once we have that identified, then we can start prototyping, start putting together these ideas in a more tangible way and testing this solution, so we can then have a final version and go out. Some additional resources that I would like to share that for me are a reference, and I check them and use them sometimes to organize my ideas or to get some inspiration as well. This book, the Jobs to be Done Playbook, is a really, really good one. Also, Mapping Experience is really helpful to give ideas on how to map all this information and how to make this information tangible for different teams. And then there is this website, jobstobedone.org, which is also, they have a lot of articles. I think they also have a podcast, and they have very interesting resources as well. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And I think we have 15 minutes to for questions and to talk as well. I don't know what's your experience using them, so it would be good to hear as well.
Thank you so much, Mireia. Super interesting. So, any questions? You can just write your hand, or maybe writing your question in the chat. So, come on, let me try.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. How would this apply to a B2B? Because I was looking into it, and it looks that it's a B2C approach. So any tips?
Yeah, on the B2B, the big difference here is on the B2B, you have more people performing this job. So that makes the process of deciding more complicated. And there you have to really focus a lot on these micro jobs that we were talking about. These micro jobs, who are the key performers, the key roles performing this job. And also understand, how attached they are to their habits. Usually, like in a B2B world, it's especially if it's bigger companies, the habit and the level of uncertainty are really, really important. They are quite attached to it, and change takes much more time, and it takes longer. So here, like, these two aspects are super, super important. You have to understand, what are the key pains there, and what are the aspects that you can kind of make better or make easier for them. Like, probably is reassuring with more information, maybe giving the option to try, for example. all this aspect of triability, reassurance, reduce uncertainty, reduce risk, reduce costs, all these more, let's say, functional aspects. Probably here the emotional and social aspects are not so important, although I would say they are there, because maybe the person who really has to make the decision, I'm sure this person will have a social and an emotional aspect also attached to it. So you have to also be clever about it, I would say. Understand that at least. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. It gives me a new angle to think about. Thanks.
Nice, thank you. I saw some messages. Thank you.
Yes. More questions?
I've got a question, but I think Ben's got his hand raised first.
Yeah, thanks, Nadine. First of all, great presentation, Mireia. Thank you very much. That was really concise and useful. But I have a question going back to the forces. When creating a category, as you guys are doing with N26, what are some effective ways to get users to break the habit, to relinquish what they've previously been using? I'm in a similar situation in my company, and when things are ingrained in people's behavior, even if they hate it, it's tough to make them break it.
Mm-hmm. First, you have to understand who's your target. There's always people who is going to be harder to push for a change. And there's always going to be people who are more willing or more easy with change. And you have to think about this curve that we were talking about at the beginning, understand like who are the innovators in your category. What are these people more open to use, more interested in, and how you can make them engage more with what you create.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Nadine?
Thanks so much for the presentation. That was great. I was wondering, so I work with mostly internal teams, especially customer-facing teams like customer support and customer service. I wondered if you'd ever have experience of applying jobs to be done in that kind of scenario.
Can you repeat, because I don't know if it was me, but it got cut at some point. Sorry.
No problem. I was wondering if you've applied the jobs to be done framework to internal teams ever. So specifically customer-facing teams whose job it is to get the customer's job done. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting question. No, I've never applied it, to be honest. But it's a really good question. I would say for that, it's really important to also understand their point of view of what's their job done. Because here there is like two sides of that. It's like what the company expects to be their job done and what they understand about it. And like see if there are gaps here. I think that can be very interesting. See how to close these gaps and see like what's the process they follow for their job done and how much this matches with what the company would expect, probably.
Nice, thank you.
Sorry.
So there is, let's check. I believe there is no more question. Mireia, thank you so much. Super interesting presentation. You can see all the messages in the chat. We are so glad to have you with us in All Women, and I believe we will take you for another presentation because you have a lot to teach us. Working as a senior UX research in N26, I believe you can face a lot of research problems with all this new online banking. So thank you so much. And this presentation and this video conference will be in our YouTube channel for those who join us late, so no worries. And we will also make a Medium article, so we will post it in all our communication channels, just to let you know.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniela. And so happy to be here. And so, yeah, thank you all of you for being here too.
Yes, thank you for joining on a Friday afternoon.
Thanks.